Focus with Jack Caudill.
And good evening, I'm Jack Caudill. Welcome to this month's edition of Focus. This month we are talking about museums here in the Black Hills. 3 expert guests with us to talk about that. Kayleigh Johnson is the Assistant Director of the South Dakota Mines Museum of Geology. Travis Duas is the Cultural Programs Manager down at Crazy Horse Memorial. And Stenson Cunningham is the Archivist at Deadwood History Inc. There is certainly no shortage of museums here in the Black Hills, ranging from large museums like the Journey here in Rapid City. There are also smaller museums, the Black Hills Mining Museum, South Dakota State Railroad Museum, South Dakota Air and Space Museum, the Custer 1881 Courthouse Museum, and the list goes on and on and on. Kayleigh, we're going to start with you. Thank you for coming up. Looking at museums, what is the importance? Why are they important to have around today?
Museums are a great space for people to come together from all different types of communities and really have an entertainment value while also trying to learn something new in a safe space, and also just learn things that maybe they wouldn't have learned in the classroom, or even see things that they never thought that they would ever see.
Travis, how about you? When you look at museums, what makes them important and relevant today?
Yeah, absolutely. When a lot of the general public thinks about museums, they think about objects or artifacts on display, but it's much more important than that. It's about protecting and preserving those objects while telling the story of a community or a people. And so it's about ascribing meaning to one's past as a community member or the member of one's own culture.
And Stenson Cunningham with Deadwood History Inc. When you look at museums, what makes them important today?
They're a place to gather as a community, so they can tell the community story. The community can tell the story to us, so we can take care of it and preserve it. But it's a way to get people together and have conversations.
Now, looking at your place specifically, Deadwood History Inc. started with the Adams Museum, is now expanded to the Adams Museum, the Brothel Deadwood, Days of 76 Museum, Historic Adams House, and the Homestake Adams Research and Cultural Center. What all are you telling with the story of Deadwood?
So we're trying to tell a well-rounded story of Deadwood. So we have the Adams Museum, which is kind of like 101 basic. So it tells you about the beginnings of Deadwood, some of our legends. We have a new legends exhibit that's really amazing. And it tells about the area as well, and just some fun, oh wow, those are kind of cool tidbit types of things. And then we have the Adams House, which is this beautiful, magnificent home owned by 2 leaders of Deadwood, the Franklin family, and then of course W.E. Adams. And so it tells the story of the architecture and then these families, so you can kind of feel like, how did somebody live in Deadwood? And then we have the Days of 76 Museum, which is all about the founding and the celebrating that happens every year at the end of July. So we have the stories about the historical parade that happens with our carriage gallery. And so at the end of July, you get to see all of our carriages go out on the street. And then it talks also about the Days of 76 Rodeo, one of the nation's premier rodeos now. And then a little bit more about Native Americans and other things related to the founding of Deadwood. And then we have the Brothel Deadwood, which kind of tells a little bit of the seedier side of the story of Deadwood, because all parts of history are important. So even though it might not be the most cleanest or most refreshing or eye-opening, I should say it's still refreshing and eye-opening, but the more cleaner version of the history, that it tells all aspects. So because we don't want to hide away from some of the dark aspects of history as well. And so with all of our, and then of course with the Homestake Adams Research and Cultural Center, you can go deeper with research of everything that you've kind of seen at all of our locations, or you can see, look for family history information if you think your family has been here. And so we try to give that whole story of Deadwood.
Now, you mentioned the Legends exhibit that you said you're excited about. What is that?
So in the Adams Museum, we have our Legends exhibit that we have updated, made more current, and we've expanded who we are representing. So typically, when you think of Deadwood, you think of Calamity Jane, you think of Wild Bill, but we have created this new exhibit with more diversity. So we talk about Lucretia Marchbanks, who is a Native American woman, Phi Li Wong, who was a leader in the Chinese community. And so we talk about all types of different people who have made Deadwood great and had a stamp in Deadwood.
What do people find intriguing about that Deadwood history?
There's a lot that's very intriguing because we are more than just Calamity Jane and Wild Bill. Our history is fascinating. So we have had people who've lived in Deadwood who've come and done amazing things. We've had way early in the 1800s and 1900s, we had a female pastor, we've had female doctors, we've had female lawyers before it became more common. And so these are really fascinating aspects that you don't always think about when you think of Deadwood, a small rural town.
Travis Dewis is the Cultural Programs Manager at Crazy Horse Memorial. Crazy Horse, of course, the home of the Indian Museum of North America. That started with a single exhibit back in 1965. Original wing of the museum dedicated in 1973. New wing built in 83, 84. How has this evolved over the years down there?
Yeah, it's changed quite a bit. You know, back in the 60s, we received our first collection. It was a rather small collection, and it was very regional to the Black Hills. But the purpose of Crazy Horse Memorial and the museum in general was to not only be a geocentric location just to represent Lakota culture, but we are now representative of all the cultures of North America, and we have expanded to over 40,000 square feet of exhibition space. So that includes areas like the Indian Museum of North America, what a visitor will walk into upon arrival, and then towards the back of the campus we have the Jolkowski family life home, which is consists of the original log cabin that Korchak constructed, and that has a lot of possessions from Korchak and Ruth and the rest of the family. And then visitors can actually also go into the sculptor's studio to see where Korchak was working on not only Crazy Horse Memorial, but also smaller sculptures as well. He's very prolific. And then we have the Mountain Carving Gallery, which is, we have exhibits in there that represent the carving of the memorial, past and present, you know, old practices and brand new practices. It's very, very interesting. And then the Native American Educational Cultural Center, which is an area on the campus that we are able to share cultural experiences to have a more hands-on learning experience.
Now, we are in the home of the Sioux here, but your museum is not strictly limited to the Sioux. It is other tribes as well?
Correct, yeah. A lot of visitors coming to the memorial think that our museum is Dakota, Nakota-centric, and actually that is incorrect. We are to protect and preserve all of the indigenous cultures of North America. And so, you know, all the way up from the Arctic to all the way down south. It's a massive, massive mission with hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of different cultures. And you know, as our collection has progressed, we have been able to get collections from each different ecoregion and each little corner of the continent. However, our collection still mainly remains primarily Lakota-based, just because we are here in the Black Hills.
Now, you mentioned that your mission is to preserve those cultures. Why is that so important?
It's important because, you know, a culture, we shouldn't have to lose a culture if we don't have to. And me being the cultural programs manager and throughout the collections as well, we get to represent so many different cultures. And I work with folks from all over the continent. I bring them in to do cultural programming. And I've worked with folks who come from a community where only 3 of their community members still speak the tribal language. So if I can provide that person to share their language so people can listen to the language, if not understand it, but to share that language, it's an immense, immense and rewarding thing to be able to hear that.
And Kayleigh Johnson is the Assistant Director of the South Dakota Mines Museum of Geology. That has been around for a long time. The first specimen came there all the way back in the 1890s. The public floor opened in 1923, moved to its current location in 1943. How has this evolved over that course of time?
It's gone a very long way. We actually started in 1885 with a donation of specimens from Hill City from one of the local professors, Gilbert Bailey. And from that donation, you know, we ended up starting to collect, and our official specimen was from 1889, which was a tiny little alligator snoot. And that is the scientific term. From there, we continued to collect in the area and eventually became partners with the federal government. So we're known as a federal repository. So we basically partner with places like Badlands National Park, Wind Cave National Park, and we store their fossils. They pay us to basically preserve and protect those fossils for the use by researchers, the public, and for education at our museum.
Now, it seems to make perfect sense to have something like that here with all the different varieties of geology we have and all the fossil specimens we have here. Does it make sense to you to have it here?
Yes, it definitely does. We have a huge, just immense area of geological history here. The Black Hills are actually part of the Rocky Mountain uplift, which would have happened basically at the tail end of the Cretaceous, end of the next era. And you know, that means we have all three different rock types. We have igneous rocks, which are kind of like volcanoes, metamorphic rocks, which have undergone a lot of temperature and pressure, and then sedimentary rocks where, you know, they form in oceans or rivers, and that's where we find a lot of our fossils. So we have a super rich fossil record and, you know, a beautiful place to go out and explore as well.
Now, for people that have not been up to the museum before, what all do you guys have up there?
We have a ton of stuff. So our museum is divided into basically two spheres. One half of the museum focuses more on the geology rock half, and particularly the mineralogy. So we have minerals from different groupings that mineralogists have come up with, and kind of shows like what are these rocks actually used for in our everyday life. And then our other half is our paleontology side, where it basically takes you back through time and really focuses on the fossils that we can find here in the surrounding region of Rapid City.
All right, we got to take a break. We'll continue our look at museums here in the Black Hills when we continue with this month's edition of Focus. And I'm Jack Caudill. Welcome back to this month's edition of Focus. We're talking about museums here in the Black Hills, of which there are quite a few. We're going to start. Travis Dewis is the Cultural Programs Manager at Crazy Horse Memorial. Looking at museums in general, how have museums changed with the times? I mean, what do you have to do to keep things fresh today?
Yeah, museums are always looking at reinterpreting their exhibits throughout the museum, and you know, we do that specifically at Crazy Horse Memorial. We've been undergoing a pretty large all the exhibit spaces and reinterpreting that to an updated story thread. So it's not just the same story that's been told since the 60s. But that being said as well, you know, the past 4 years have been a very macro look at how museums operate with the pandemic. It's like everywhere was turned upside down on its head, but museums especially. And so Crazy Horse Memorial itself actually closed to the public for the first time ever in the 75 years. In that period. And so museums, they had to change a lot and go into the digital realm if they hadn't already, and it was very much pushing them into that digital realm. But that being said, museums and museum professionals and the professional organizations, museums have a way, and those people, they have a way of working together and sharing ideas and sharing what's working and what's not working. And so I think, you know, a lot of museums came out on the top of that, but there, of course, are some sad stories out there about museums being lost during the pandemic because of those reasons.
Tia Stenson Cunningham is the archivist with Deadwood History Inc. here in the Black Hills. How do you see museums changing over time and evolving and keeping up with the times?
So I agree. A lot of it is changing exhibits. So not only to put new information out there, but to change it so that people want to keep coming back. So we talked earlier about our Legends exhibit, but also in the days of our Adams Museum, we're updating a lot of our exhibits. So one of the newer ones that's going to hopefully be available to the public at the end of July is one where we're really talking about the beginnings of Deadwood and the fire of 1879. And with that, we are adding technology, so making things a little bit more interactive. So you're not just looking with your eyes. So we had this really amazing documentary feel video created about the fire, and it gives you sound, it gives you visual, so you can really feel immersed into what was happening versus kind of having an outside view. So being really immersive and having people experience the history in all parts of them.
How important is that technology, especially when you've got kids coming in, and these are kids that live on their screens? They want that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's important because it helps engage them, but it's also important, even though we have all of this amazing technology, and how it can help engage and help people keep coming back to the museum without them actually being there through online collections or online exhibits. But it's still also really important, even if we're advancing technology, to focus on the artifact, because there's still something really special about looking at an artifact and being like, that came from the past. And so the technology might bring people in, but it's the artifacts that you see that gets you to stay.
Kayleigh Johnson is the Assistant Director of the South Dakota Mines Museum of Geology. Your museum focused on old stuff. How do you keep that fresh and keep up with the times with that?
It's a very big challenge. A lot of our large exhibits were made, you know, in the 40s and 50s, and some of them we can't afford to change, or we don't want to, because we want to preserve our understanding of science, what it was back then, but we can change the interpretation behind them. So we've actually been participating this year in a MAP program, or museum assessment program, that's actually been taking a deep dive into looking at our exhibits and kind of taking a step back and seeing, okay, this is where we've been since also about the 1960s, and where do we want to go from here? So we're actually bringing in some peer reviewers and have done a really big workbook, so many pages, about how, where we're at, where we want to go, and really, you know, focusing on, you know, do we want to bring technology in? How can we, you know, change what we already have with the limited amount of ability that we have? But we're really excited to, you know, work together with local institutions as well as museums across the nation to try to update our museum.
Do you use much technology? You're at a school that is all about technology.
Yeah.
How does that incorporate into the museum?
That's a very good question. Our museum definitely has a bit of an old feel. We do have some more exhibits that are interactive, like we have a active raspberry shake that acts as like a seismometer, so that folks can see what a seismometer looks like when it picks up an earthquake. So people can actually jump on the floor and see that in real life, and see how, you know, geologists basically use that to try to predict earthquakes and mitigate natural hazards. So that's one form of technology, and we've been exploring more options as we've gone through this program.
Going back to Tia, how do you guys market yourselves these days? There's so many different things to choose from, especially in this area. How do you get people to come to the museum?
Well, Rose, our communication director, does an amazing job. We use social media, and so there's all kinds of different things you can do with social media to reach out to the right people who might have similar interests, and advertise to them different events or the history. So one of the things like I do for our company is I pick out historical documents and photographs, I research them, and then Rose puts that information out on our social media to engage visitors in our community to continue to share that knowledge. And then there's the rack cards, so the things that tourists pick up at almost any spot. And then email news blasts of like, hey, this is an event coming up. Being in collaboration with news and newspapers, and just making friends and making sure that we are providing a positive experience, so that visitors go talk to other people about how great of an experience that they had, because word of mouth probably is one of the best traveling things to get the word out there.
Travis, how do you get people to come to the museum?
You know, luckily we are in a unique situation that a majority of museums are not. So right now we get 1.2 million visitors a year, and you know, we like to say that they come for the mountain, but they stay for the museum. So if a visitor comes in to see the memorial of the mountain itself, you know, they walk through the museum and they experience what we have to offer there. And you know, a lot of people don't know that we have a museum, to be honest with you, but they see the mountain driving down the highway and they say, we want to go in there and see that. And then they, you know, a lot of people are very happy to find these great museum exhibits and these cultural programs and everything like that while they get there. But that being said, you know, we do marketing. You know, we can't just say that the mountain is the best billboard that we have. You know, we do traditional and more contemporary forms of marketing. You know, social media is huge. We have a couple different social media pages, one for the memorial itself, one for the museum, and one for the university. And you know, a lot of our visitors come throughout the summer, but just recently throughout the winter, we've been having museum events, specifically cultural programs that have been focused on the Black Hills residents. And so just a numerous amount of avenues that we use to reach our target demographic, and it seems to be working really well.
Now, there's a lot of fascination with foreign visitors with native cultures. How much of that do you see at your place?
We see a lot. You know, our media and marketing and sales department, you know, they're going to travel trade shows this year in India. You know, they've been to China, they've been to South America, and but the demographics that are particularly very, very interested, and it's very interesting why they're interested, but German folks, they come to the memorial looking for that connection to the culture. And I know a lot of people that have been to Germany to share their culture, and it's really an interesting phenomenon how interested the German people are with native culture. But we see a lot of that, and we offer a safe space for international folks to experience that.
All right, we got to take another break. We'll continue our look at museums here in the Black Hills when we continue with this month's edition of Focus. I'm Jack Caudill. Welcome back to this month's edition of Focus, talking about museums here in the Black Hills. Stenson Cunningham is the archivist with Deadwood History Inc. Outside of your own museums up there in Deadwood, what museums, do you have favorite museums either here in this area or elsewhere that you really like?
Oh, that is a hard question, because I've been growing up going to museums my whole entire life. It's kind of why I do what I do. I really hold my local historical society of Clay County in Minnesota near and dear to my heart. I really love what they do and the outreach that they do and all that I learned from them. They're a really great, small but strong museum. I was the Milwaukee Public Museum, where I did graduate school in Milwaukee. That is an amazing museum with amazing natural history information. It has a great history of just being a museum and what they have done for the museum profession. And it's really, they're also upgrading and getting a new space. So it's been really fascinating to see how they're working with the community who feels the old museum is very nostalgic and it's having a hard time letting go, how they're trying to keep that feeling of the old museum but bring it to something new.
Travis, how about you? Any museums that you are particularly fond of?
Yeah, I could list off several major institutions not in the Black Hills, but locally, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Journey Museum and Learning Center. The Journey does a fantastic job of presenting the history of the Black Hills from the beginning of time all the way up until today. And it's wonderfully interpretive. They have amazing programs such as Journey into Space, and then their summer camps throughout the summer are just fantastic if you are looking for something for your kids to do.
All right. And Kayleigh Johnson, Assistant Director of the South Dakota Mines Museum of Geology. How about you? What museums are near and dear to your heart?
I'm definitely in the same boat as Tia. I love all museums, but specifically I really enjoy even just the visitor centers at our national parks. Badlands National Park has been doing a fantastic job of interpreting the local geology and paleontology of their region. And then I know Wind Cave is actually going through a huge exhibit day update as well with theirs, and I'm excited to see the results.
All right, very rich area that if you want to get out and go to museums, plenty of places to go see for not a lot of money, which is another good thing.
Yep.
All right. All right. We want to thank you guys for coming up. Stenson Cunningham with Deadwood History, Travis Dewis with Crazy Horse Memorial, and Kayleigh Johnson with the South Dakota Mines Museum of Geology. I want to thank you for joining us for this month's edition of Focus. Hope to see you again the first Sunday night of next month. Good night.